Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you joining us virtually from all around the world. We're so happy to have you all for another installment of our Crafted Future event series. My name is Steve Marchese. I'm the Chief Production Officer here at the Webby Awards, starting all the way back in 2006, when the only thing we honored was, in fact, just websites. And I've been producing and building sites not only in my role here at the Webby Awards, but also in my free time for the last few decades. And today's topic is near and dear to my heart. That's probably why my illustrious colleagues Claire and CL trusted the guy who's usually off camera to be on camera for today. So the camera is on. This event is an offshoot of a program that we've had for years with our incredible partners at WP Engine called Crafted with Code. It highlights Webby winning websites and goes a little bit deeper than our usual 5 words to understand the stories behind the builds. And we've decided on Crafted Future as the name of this virtual series because there's still so much innovation happening in the space every day. And we wanted to create a platform and a forum to discuss these trends with people like yourselves who build, design, strategize, and utilize websites every single day. I'm honored to be joined today by 3 absolute website experts, each with a unique perspective on the web and where it's headed as part of today's The Freedom to Create conversation. Now, before we dive in, I'd like to level set a little bit. If you're here, you've likely read the description of today's conversation on the registration site, maybe in social promotion that was out there or an email that you received. We'll be talking about Headless CMS. And now Headless, like blockchain before it or stable diffusion right now, is part of the tech and dev zeitgeist out there in the world. It's one of those terms that feels almost undefinable in that there are so many definitions out there of it. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to our panel, ask them not only to introduce themselves and tell us about their companies and what they do, but to give us a really quick definition of what headless is to them, what it means. And let's just get started and jump right in. So I'm going to start with Isadora Marlow-Morgan, the president of the Isadora agency. You're up.
Hi, everybody. As Steve mentioned, I'm president and chief creative officer and also namesake of Isadora Digital Agency. We're based in Manhattan Beach, California. For the past 10 years, we've been helping partners like News Corp and Gartner and Razor transform their digital presence through powerful website experiences. And I'm really excited to talk to you all about this new emerging technology, Headless CMS, because it's really important to all of us.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Isadora. Next, I'm going to pass it over to Joshua Ellis, the principal engineer at WideEye.
Hi, everyone. I am also super honored to be here. This is a great opportunity. I'm a principal engineer at WideEye Creative. We're a full-service creative agency that's based in Washington, D.C., but we're actually mostly remote, so we're all over the country. Most of the things that we do are social good and progressive organizations. And I'm super excited to talk about Headless because it's something that's a burgeoning topic within our agency and with our clients. And in general, Headless to me is, I'm obviously an engineer, so I'm going to take it to that granular level, is essentially API-driven decoupled architecture. In its most basic form, it's at least 2 servers talking to each other, but in its most grand form, it's the ability to spread your content through an API to pretty much any viewport or device that you could possibly imagine. And it's super exciting to be here and talk about all the exciting ways that we're going to leverage that in the future.
Thank you, Joshua. Appreciate that. And then finally, last but not least, certainly, is our friend Jason Konen, who's the director of product management over at our illustrious partners, WP Engine. Jason, the floor is yours.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me. Super honored to be here as well. Looking forward to the conversation. Steve mentioned I'm the director of product at WP Engine, responsible for our Atlas offering, which is our headless platform that allows you to bring these awesome experiences to life. And, my background when I came out of college was front-end web dev. I used to code websites by scratch. I didn't have frameworks. I didn't have APIs or anything like that. So, I was just, doing all that on my own. And then CMSs came along like, oh, this is really interesting. Now I don't have to code up what marketers give me. They can go and do that on their own. That's really cool. But I sort of got into product management around that time, and kept an eye on it. And we get into this headless world. It's like, oh, you can bring back some of that freedom that the developer had to pick and choose their technology, but you're giving that publisher, the content creator, a really good experience in order to manage their content. So it's like kind of the best of both worlds when I look at it. So that's why I'm excited about Headless and what we're doing here.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. So we're going to jump right in, and I want to sort of start with real world application, if you will, because I think the best way to define a system is to talk about how we're using it out there in the world. And I think, Isadora, this one's for you. I think from an agency perspective, brands, and we're talking about it right now, brands with traditional CMS, they'd have to take transitional steps to kind of integrate headless as a technology into their infrastructures. Firstly, what are the challenges for agencies, in that context? But also, when do you know that your brand is ready to go headless? That's the big question here. Is how do we know that it's a CMS that's right for your brand and the work that you're going to be doing out there on the web?
I think it's some really important questions, and I think the easiest way to assess if you are needing a change are, what are the problems that you're having and facing today? Are you hearing from your team that they're having a hard time maintaining their content, keeping consistent content across different platforms? Are you hearing from your team that there are limitations from the current CMS, developers saying, well, we can't do that because of the way the CMS is structured? Or your site is loading slowly and the marketing team is going, why is it so slow? And dev is going, we don't have a choice. This is the way it has to be. And now there is a choice. And so I would say, assess what those problems are and see if they match up to what we're talking about here in terms of what a headless CMS can provide. So a headless CMS ultimately can provide more flexibility for the developers, as Joshua mentioned. It can be creating a faster site. And also it makes more consistency for your content managers, because they are going to have one place to create their content, and you can push out that data across multi-channels and different platforms. So it's more consistent. So there are a lot of values in going headless. I think a big challenge in headless is why we're here today, understanding it and helping your team and your company and your leadership understand the value of implementing it. And that's something that we've been working on at our agency, is helping our partners understand why they should do it, and how they can convince their CFOs and their CMOs to move in this direction. Because usually you'll find the tech department is all for it. Tech team's all for it. Now it's getting everybody else on board. So one of the things is, how do we convince the CFOs who are going to be signing the checks to move into this approach and help them understand it? It's really upfront cost versus long-term cost, right? You're going to have a little bit more upfront cost when you're building headless, because there's more of a load. But when you think about that long-term value, the value in not having to do such a big rebuild when you want to do enhancements, not needing the dev team as much for your updates and maintenance, having more security in the fact that your site is safer because it's decoupled from your CMS, and that it's going to load faster. And we know every second counts when you're trying to get clicks and users to spend time on your site. I think some of those values also connect with the needs of these CMOs, but also when we're thinking about the chief marketing officers and how to communicate the value, it's that less human error in maintaining your content is really important as well. So CMOs, CFOs, get them on board, and then make sure you're selecting the right team to build a site like that. I think, Steve, you're on mute.
Yep, I'll mute myself. I was like, oh yeah, sure. No, I think we all three of us understand exactly why the CFO might be hesitant to lean into this strategy. Joshua, for you, I'm wondering, is there a hesitancy for the dev team, right? So going headless, of course, the length of transition period can be unpredictable. It's obviously a very different perspective. I know that you've actually implemented WP Engine's own Atlas CMS to utilize as a headless solution. What would that transition look like a little bit? How long would it take to fully integrate it into an existing system? Is it something that a dev team we've talked a little bit about would be really excited to kind of integrate? But what are some of the considerations that the dev team needs to sort of take on board when they make this transition? And Jason, you can jump in as well after Josh.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, tech teams are definitely interested in usually biting at the bit to implement headless, because you get to play with a lot of fancy new tools, which are leading edge technologies, which oftentimes make our job faster and easier and honestly more scalable in the long term. But to something that Isadora was talking about, there is certainly a little bit of confusion as to what it actually means to be headless. And there is no real monolithic definition. And each way that it may be applied, whether from a technical or from a content management perspective, there are so many different ways that you can do this. And in terms of the engineering side or using systems that already exist, you can do so iteratively on a lot of platforms. I mean, some of the most prominent CMSs, whether that's WordPress or Craft or something like that, a lot of those at this point support essentially GraphQL APIs or the ability to do headless builds off of existing CMSs with pretty limited changes to the underlying infrastructure. It's basically cutting off the head of your old system and slapping a new one on, which is, you know, headless lends itself to some fun metaphors here. But that's one totally valid perspective or way to implement it, is to literally do that iterative, use what you have, the CMS you're using now, and just build on top of that. We typically do, in most of our use cases within our agency, we're doing mostly new product development. And that's where something like Atlas is super helpful, and integrating that into how we build and the systems that we already use, where headless presents the problem of having to basically manage multiple infrastructure. So how do you reduce that cognitive burden when you're building these new products? So, for example, we built a recent web app called the LGBTQ Healthcare Directory, which was built with the Tegan and Sarah Foundation and the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association. And that's built on Atlas. And that was the only way we were able to do this quickly and within cost, is because we had that infrastructure gain from having the tooling that has really been developed now, which is really allowing us to handle these transition periods effectively and within kind of a fast-moving agency environment.
Interesting. So you know, you discussed a little bit of it sort of improving the iterative approach to web development, also to the content ability for the content teams to sort of plug into those interfaces. I wonder, you know, in terms of most use cases that we're seeing are kind of new product development, and this is something, Jason, feel free to jump into as well, starting from either both or no content or adapting content from like an outdated content system, which is what Isadora had mentioned before. In both of these scenarios, the transition usually encompasses the scope of a full site build. What can brands and agencies do to maintain their digital brand image during that transition period? That's something that's really interesting to me, in a sense of creating those efficiencies and sort of iterating on a little bit more of the, if you will, the content development process, but from the development perspective, making it easier for those content teams to use potentially tools that they're not that familiar with. And I'll throw that over to Jason.
Yeah. So, you know, when I look at things, and I certainly have a WordPress lens on it, you know, we have a lot of folks that have been on WordPress for many, many years, and they have their content there. And you say, okay, well, I want to go headless. Well, that sort of means rethinking like your whole site and your whole, like how you're going to approach things. And so what I've seen is we have some folks that'll do this, you know, piece by piece. They'll take portions of their site, or, you know, like maybe their homepage, make that headless, but some of the other content is still monolithic. And they sort of stagger this out so that, you know, it's not this overwhelming, all-encompassing build. You just sort of do it piece by piece. And the content editor what we're really trying to do is make it so their days don't change. They still go in, they still edit content, they edit long form content, they're editing blocks, they're working with fields and things like that in the way they used to. It's just the web developer can now go and grab that through GraphQL and build that into their app. So do you want to do that all at once as a complete rebuild, or do you say, you know what, we're going to start with this section and go forward? If you don't have a CMS and you're not doing that, it's like, okay, well, you have your choice of a lot of different things out there. Why might you choose WordPress? It's because a lot of marketers know and love it. It's been around a long time. It's the best one out there for long form content. So maybe you pick that, right? And now you can start setting up the site and getting the content creator building it and seeing what's happening, while the developer is out there saying, okay, we're going to take this data and bring it to mobile. We're going to bring this data and take it to a kiosk. We're going to bring this data and take it to some other place where you couldn't do that before. So I think it's sort of a long-winded way of saying it's like, I think you have a lot of optionality as you're building these projects. You can do them piecemeal, you can do them all at once, do a hard cutover, but you're sort of given the flexibility to figure out what's right for you. And I don't that. Because it's content data, you can just access that when you want to access it and make it available when you want to make it available. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And I think we're touching upon this larger idea of content being distributed to all these different outlets, right? Like, and we'll get deeper into it. I wonder, and this can be, I feel like Isadora, this might be in your wheelhouse. What are ways that the agencies and the brands can maintain that digital brand presence and that digital image during this transition? That's something that I think about quite a bit. If you have content that's being flown out to a number of whether it's Internet of Things, whether it's a number of websites and or newsletters, et cetera, how do you sort of maintain that digital brand consistency while we're going through this transition state?
Sure. As Joshua and Jason mentioned, there's different ways that you could start to implement this transition. You don't have to do it all at once. You could have different environments where you're building out your headless CMS in one and keeping your consistent consistent structure in the other. However, the better approach, as Joshua mentioned, is to implement it in small changes, so that you're doing it in layers and not creating a big change within your organization to not interrupt the flow of content. And because we can't have a site be down, we can't have a content management pause for any significant period of time, because we need audiences to be able to consume that content and keep our brands fresh. So that approach of implementing it in layers is, I think, probably the smoothest, most consistent approach.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about sort of unifying content and making it easy for teams to update according to what the needs are from the viewport output. Yeah. Question for all three of you. What are some of the ways that we can sort of refine and personalize the user experience as a result of this? We're talking about unification, which is always more efficient from obviously the content side, and the developers love it. So what about sort of, now that we've had everything, we have everything in one place and we're sort of flowing it out via the API to the various viewports, how can we sort of refine and personalize the experiences now that we're sort of in one place with the data? Thoughts on that? Anyone feel free to jump in. That's for everybody.
I have a lot of thoughts on that. Personalization and localization is such a big topic. It's like, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What use case do you have for it? Do I want to know, you, Steve, you've come to my website before and I know the things that you've purchased, and therefore I might show you different items that are related to the things you've purchased if this happens to be an e-commerce type build. Or, Joshua comes to my site and I happen to know him, and I can provide events that I know he's signed up for before or indicated interest into. So you start looking at, okay, you have all this content. Are you organizing this content in a way that you can present these different, content pieces based on who you are, right? And so, from a headless standpoint, it's like, well, You need the headless CMS to be able to say this type of content is for this type of person or this specific person, if you want to get to that. And then your front end needs to say, who are you? Use whatever mechanisms you want to use to authenticate or indicate or figure out who that person is. And that could just be you're in the US or you're in Germany or you're in Australia, right? And then picking the appropriate content to show them based on that. So the front end has this, freedom to go and implement that. And then, the content creators can then go and manage that in their CMS. It's like, oh, okay, I have this article and it's written in 4 different ways. And here's the people that get that content, right?
I wonder, Joshua, I know you talked a little bit earlier about the work that you do in the social space. And, we talk often about accessibility at the Webby Awards and being able to, from the front end, both Jason and Joshua, this is for you both, be able to sort of recognize the user and maybe what machine the user's on, what browser version that they're using. Talk a little bit about being able to customize from an accessibility perspective a little bit of that content by recognizing that you're serving out universal content, but the people that are ingesting it might be on older machines with slower connections. That kind of real personalization via accessibility is very interesting to us at the Webby Awards, and wanted to see what you all think about that as well.
Yeah, totally. And just to loop back to what Jason was just talking about, in terms of personalization, generally, one of the beautiful things about Headless is it allows you to seamlessly integrate data sources from all over the place, even not just your CMS. So whether you're doing like a cross-reference between a user profile into, a cloud search provider or something like that to get, tailored results, that is, from a functional standpoint, and particularly from an engineering standpoint, doing it in a headless system is so much easier to work through that technology than it is to do in a more traditional monolithic architecture. In terms of accessibility, though, we usually don't approach things necessarily from a personalization standpoint in terms of accessibility, since everything we built should be accessible. Like good quality engineering work should be accessible, bare none. But we haven't done this too much in a headless situation, but we have done a font size and dark mode controls. One of the ones that we've built, you can actually see on the whitehouse.gov. That's one of our previous projects, not headless, but things like that where you're cookieing certain behavior to ensure that someone is getting the appropriate experience on the web. But back to headless, you also have the ability, like I was talking about, to use these new and exciting tools, which oftentimes allows you to build accessible sites easier and with a lot of the with fewer of the constraints that we have to deal with some monolithic architectures that output some outdated HTML or some outdated, whatever. We're really totally in control and can frame and change the website dependent upon the user however we want, which is great, and that's how you build a really solid product that works for everyone.
Yeah, and the from a product perspective, and since I have 2 agency people among the 3 of you, and Jason, I know a big part of our relationship with WP Engine is connecting you guys with agencies who make some of the best of the internet. I want to shift the conversation slightly to talk a little bit about the agency context. And Isadora, I know that you work quite a bit with a number of different brands across multiple spaces. What are some of the benefits that Headless would offer to an agency in terms of being able to provide that as a solution for their particular brand clients that they have?
Yeah. I mean, I think simply put, it's building trust in your partners and leading your partners. If we're doing our jobs well, we are constantly adopting and mastering new techniques in development and user experience and content management, and being that steward for our partners, thinking for them about the future of their brand and their digital needs. And by suggesting and ultimately communicating the value and implementing a headless CMS approach, they're going to build trust in our agency that we are helping them have the best digital solutions for their brand. And that works with both large and small brands. And I know that was a question we were going to touch on is, when is it right to go to headless, and who is it for? When you're a big brand, I think the value is easier to see, right? Because you have bigger problems. When you might be a smaller brand with kind of like more boutique digital needs, and you keep hearing about, oh, well, I can feed it into my native app, or I can feed it into my kiosk, and they might be saying, well, I don't have any of those needs. I don't use that. So why is it right for me? But it's right for even small solutions. I think no matter how small you are, having a faster site, having a more secure site, and having a site that has the flexibility for scale for future needs. What might you want for your business in the next 3-5 years? Might you be down the road wanting to have a native app or a kiosk? Possibly. So why not build the foundation now for that scale? Because those needs are becoming more and more common. And even at a really simple, narrow focus, I know all of us work on WordPress sites, and a pain point for us always is maintaining the consistent WordPress database on dev and staging and production, and it's always a migration, and it's just such a pain point for even the smallest WordPress site, and this solves that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been at the Webbies for quite a long time, and one of my favorite things is when a small agency, a small site, small brand ends up winning over like this massive company in our People's Voice voting that we do every April. And I was wondering, what are some of the gaps that Headless can kind of fill in on the small agency, small brand side that kind of support the work of the small agency or the small brand? That's one of the things we had on our list of things that we talked about on Monday together. It's really always great because I know that we have a lot of small agency people on this conversation right now that are interested in knowing what are some of the efficiencies that they can get out of adopting headless. And we talk a lot about speed and security. We can also sort of get into that as well. But Jason, I'll throw that over to you, and feel free to jump in, Josh, on the engineering side. But question is how we can sort of build some efficiencies by moving over to headless for the smaller brands and agencies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something we see a lot, as people are adopting this technology, and those that have sort of cracked the nut and said, oh, I get this now. They've come to this realization that a lot of what they're building can be reusable. And so they're saying, all right, I'm actually going to make components. I'm going to go and make these libraries of things I can reuse and use them over and over and over again. There's a little bit more lift up front, but I might be able to use it in 20 different projects or something like that. So if I was an agency focused on, the SMB market, I would go out and say, okay, well, what types of projects are we taking on? What types of digital experiences are we giving? I'm going to make a component library that gives everybody this baseline. So when I start up a project, like I'm not starting with a blank canvas, right? In sort of the monolithic terms, you might be using themes and things like that. In a headless term, you're using, components and things like that. And then saying, oh, I'm going to bring these all together. And I might have a blueprint, something that Atlas has to get you started is, here's a bunch of code to get your front end working. And you can then customize it from there. So if you're an agency and you go do that, say, I'm going to make presence sites. I'm focused on that. They all have these components. I'm going to go and make those. And then when you're taking that project on, somebody can go and pull all those things together and get that prototype up fast. And then you can start iterating on look and feel and usability and content and things like that. So I think there's a massive speed improvement, not just in the actual speed of the servers when you're, in a headless end, but speed of development. Once you understand how to develop and organize, and you start building out those libraries, you can be very fast, very iterative, and everything you're doing is building more for the next project that you can reuse.
Yeah, I wonder, and would you all say that this is a solution that, regardless of the brand or the type, because people tend to think of a CMS as something that is necessary for a significant amount of content. Let's say you're a digital publisher like the New York Times, right? Is it a solution that can be applied to a company that may have less daily updatable content that's needed? You know, something that, like, I'm thinking about the sort of the contrast between whitehouse.org, you know, as an organization that has significant amount of content versus a company that may not be a daily publisher of content. Is it a solution that can be applied to both?
I can speak to that. I think from a technical side, sure, all the benefits that you're getting from going headless, whether it's like static generated pages that are being served from the edge, or, you know, the security concerns, all of those still exist even if you're producing less content. Obviously, you know, large content publishers may be getting a greater net gain, but you're still getting gains from implementing this technology. And something that Jason was just talking about in terms of components and whatnot, headless actually has been around for a few years, but we're kind of hitting this like perfect golden spot where it's matured enough that the tooling and the frameworks are out there and the open source is there to actually get you up and running. So even for super small or smaller content publishers, building sites with a lot of this open source code that is out there to help you get started quickly is really allowing it to really enter that space where previously we're talking about large technology investments just to get up and running and getting your CMS connected to a front end. Now it's like I can spin up an Next.js instance and connect it to a WordPress site in probably in 2 hours, you know, which is something you couldn't do, you know, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. I'm going off script, guys. We're going rogue right now because I find it really, really interesting. Josh, you mentioned that it's something that we couldn't do. What are some of the factors that have contributed to the current environment online that allow this sort of golden moment for headless? It has been around for quite a long time. The term itself has been around for a really long time. Why now? Why is it a conversation that's really part of the technical zeitgeist out there? People are talking about it. We're doing this. I can't imagine we would have had this conversation a couple of years ago. What are sort of the expectations of the user, you know, as a modern 2023 internet user? What are some of the environmental factors that have contributed to this being a really good solution right now for websites and for brands and agencies?
I mean, I can keep going, but it's really like boils down from like a technical standpoint, it boils down to how much time we have to invest in order to get these things to actually work. I think Atlas is a great proof point of this. You finally have a WordPress instance that sits right next to a Node.js server. So you can deploy from a single GitHub repo and it's there, it just works. Along with we built that LGBTQ healthcare directory using the WP Engine framework, which is FOSS.js, as our basis for it. And that, you know, it's a pre-release software, but that alone gave us just the head start to get going in a way that we did not have before. And things like Gatsby or Next.js, a bunch of these frameworks that I think we'll talk about a little bit later, but those have just matured in a way that they're quite a bit more user-friendly. And really, everyone expects at this point a website to load quickly and to work well across all platforms. And that's really what we're talking about, is we're talking about how to build products that can do that well and in a sustainable way. And this is really the perfect avenue and kind of the perfect avenue to match that user expectation that websites in 2023 actually work on your phone and on desktop. And it doesn't matter where you are. And that's like the golden rule.
Yeah, I would. Isadora, I mean, we talked a little bit about what the expectations are of the brand, and of course, we just mentioned the user. Are you seeing that as well on the agency side of just, you know, people, your clients are expecting things to work everywhere at all times without fail?
And I'd say it's not even just our clients. It's to Joshua's point, it's everybody. And, you know, I think especially because we, you know, all went through the pandemic and everybody was isolated. And even though trajectory of use for digital was just skyrocketing, that just boosted everybody hugely, because what if we're stuck at home and now we are more connected, and the need grew exponentially to have an incredibly effective digital presence everywhere that users are interacting with your brand. And so I think what's happening now is the technology has caught up to the business need. And while Headless CMS was there, and to Joshua's point, there were solutions out there, you know, developers understood the need and of Headless, and now we have solutions like Atlas available to us that allow us to implement it faster.
Yeah, good time to let's talk tech a little bit, you know, and get into some of the benefits of the sort of bring your own front end system feature of Headless. Josh, if you want to jump in, and certainly Jason, I know this is a meatball that you're going to hit out of the park for sure. It's in your wheelhouse, but you know, on the engineering side, let's talk a little bit about some of those benefits if we can for a little bit.
Yeah, totally. I mean, in terms of an engineering team, a lot of the things we're doing these days are heavy JavaScript. Like, that is probably 90% of what I'm writing these days. And that's coming from someone who, you know, primarily works in a WordPress world. And that's because WordPress's content editing alone is moving towards custom React blocks within the editorial experience. So it almost makes sense for us to be writing our JavaScript on the back end for our CMS, and then writing JavaScript on the front end as well. It reduces that cognitive burden, like I was talking about, for our engineers. There are some challenges there, though, because that is a different level of JS or TypeScript engineering than most traditional web developers who are working in, you know, a monolithic CMS architecture are used to. You know, we're talking about building full stack applications. So there are trade-offs there that need to be balanced with whatever the competencies of your engineering teams are. But once again, it's new tools, and new tools that are built to allow developer efficiency and to allow you to do things the right way faster. And that alone is a huge gain that can't be understated here.
And with that in mind, should you go custom, or should you opt for an already sort of existing platform? What's easier for an engineering team? And then we can also talk about what's easier for the content team as well. But from the engineering side, you know, what's a better fit, or is it just contextual to what the need is?
I think I work mostly in an agency, and we're producing products pretty rapidly. It would be crazy for us to build something from scratch. There is, like, from square, or like from net zero, insane. There is so much open source framework, or so many open source frameworks out there that give you that, you know, 1,000, 10,000 hour head start that allow you to do these things appropriately. Just like WordPress allows you, or any CMS allows you to do your content beautifully and manage all of that. There are a lot of frameworks out there that will allow you to build your front ends quickly and iteratively without all of that burden that you need to take on. That I was talking about, the maturation of Headless itself, you know, that is really where we're at. And that's the reason why it's kind of a golden era, is because we have all of this to build upon that allows us to do these things now in a cost-effective way.
I'll add to that and say, I think it was Joshua who mentioned earlier on the call, the value of using open source content management systems or frameworks. I think that's really important when you're thinking about longevity of what you're going to be building. You may have to switch your engineering team, have a new developer, and we've had partners come to us where they're tied to the code that was built, and they have to rebuild from the ground up, or they can't find anybody who understands how it was structured or how it was built. And so therefore, one of the things that I would say is an important thing to think about when you're going headless is making sure that you're still following best practices, having a good, using frameworks that other developers can jump in and understand if you need to make changes and updates to your site down the road.
Yeah, it almost feels like there was pre-GitHub and post-GitHub, and like that's where we are now. Jason, can you talk a little bit about, in terms of your product, some of the solutions that it provides? Because Joshua really mentioned, I love the idea of the 10,000 hour head start. Some of those things that are built into some of the WP Engine offerings, particularly Atlas, that we can talk about a little bit. When a brand needs a solution, what they're getting.
Right. Yeah. And what we're really trying to be with Atlas is this complete platform for you to bring your digital desires, to fruition. You can actually go and do this thing. And so, when we look at this isn't like hosting, or is it just not, managed WordPress, or it's not just a framework. It's the complete end-to-end solution. So you can go and be very creative and bring a solution for your customers to market. And so, as was mentioned before, it's like, okay, well, we have managed WordPress. WP Engine's fantastic at that. And so that's there. And we have, our node offering as well. So now you can start building on that. And then you start layering on developer tools. You say, okay, well, how are developers going to work today? Oh, well, they're going to be, using source control. They're going to be doing things, especially in the WordPress world, you might not have been doing before, working with JavaScript. How do you go do that? So what we've sort of tried to provide here end to end is like, okay, are you trying to put together a JavaScript front end? Well, we built Faust.js. You don't have to use it. You can bring your own. But, for those of you that haven't done this before, here's our proposal of how you work, right? And that's built on top of Next.js, and it works really well, and it brings these features of WordPress that the publishers are reliant on, like previews and authentication and block library support and things like that, and makes that work, right? And so then the developer doesn't have to worry about a lot of those things. That bootstraps them. It's like, okay, this is already done. I can focus in on what I need to do for this particular project. You get into things like, WordPress itself. So we have, headless features like our Atlas content modeler, which, brought content modeling to WordPress in a way that wasn't there before. And, that is going to be incorporated with advanced custom fields, ACF. So then everybody has access to that, right? Not just headless, but everybody in the WordPress ecosystem can have access to that. And then you get into, okay, well, I have to do alerting and monitoring. I have to do domain management. I have to manage redirects. I have to do all of these things to bring the project out. That's all there in the platform. So not only building the front end, but managing the CMS, the back end, getting it all running, monitoring it, and bringing it to production. It's all in there for you. If you don't have that, you're going to multiple vendors, and then that takes time, and you might have multiple invoices, and you might like all of these things. So we're saying, like, look, headless is this thing to bring that digital experience to life. Here's a complete package that goes and does that for you.
Excellent. Before we wrap it up and get some questions, which I see in our chat over here coming our way, I'm going to ask all three of you, because I know that we have a number of people that have tuned in to learn more about headless because they might be thinking about transitioning to it. A couple of best practices, a couple of takeaways that you would sort of give to someone who's considering moving their CMS to a headless solution. Something that before going into that particular transition and making the decision, something that they should consider, a really important thing that they should take with them prior to making that decision. And I'll start again with Isadora here.
I would say an important thing is to think about your workflow for both your content management, for your site updates, and for your developers, and to understand what that is and make a plan around that, because that is one of the big solutions that Headless CMS provides. And so that's, and I think it's something that's often forgotten about.
Yeah, just
yeah, Jason, go for it.
Sort of expand on that. It's like you have to think about the content creator and the developer. So when people are asking me, and it's like, well, why would I use Headless? And it's like, well, would you like the best in breed CMS and content experience for your team, as well as a digital platform that your developers enjoy working on, right? Like it's like those two things coming together. It's like, oh, I can use modern things, modern development techniques, all of that, and the marketer's happy, and they can use the tools that they know and love and have been using for a long time. I think you bring those two things together, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. So don't just think about the developer, don't just think about the publisher, think about both of them. And the thing that I sort of run into a lot is, people have been working monolithically for a long time. And if you've been doing that a long time, you have patterns that you're so good at them that you don't even have to think about them as you're working, like, because you've been doing it for so long. Well, this is a new thing. This is a new way of doing things. And so all the patterns aren't all there yet, right? That's exciting for some people and scary for others, right? Like, so if you're excited by that, it's like you're going to go out there and say, this is how you should do things. This is how you should, solve these problems. And you're solving them in a different way. In the WordPress world, I'm building a project. I might say, I'm trying to solve this problem. I'm going to look at some plugins. I'm going to look at some themes, and that's going to solve my problem. Well, how do you do that in Headless phase? Well, I'm going to look at some React libraries. I'm going to look at components. I'm going to look at those, like, the stuff's there. You're looking in different places. So keep that in mind as you're developing. It's like, oh, this is an opportunity to rethink and optimize how we're working. The stuff's there. I have to look in a different place for it.
Mm-hmm. Joshua, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I can only echo that. That's a good summation. The only thing I would add is one caveat to Headless is, by definition, it is a more complicated infrastructure. So make sure you're making the right decisions to set yourself up for a sustainable and scalable solution for the long term. Because really, the biggest challenge is going to be putting too many complicated parts into the system, which is far too hard to manage. I think that is really the biggest challenge with Headless. They can really grow beyond the complexity that you can feasibly understand. So make smart choices, keep it small, keep it simple, and keep it very focused on what your intention is. And that's some of the beauty of Headless too, is one platform may not satisfy your exact need. That one front end for your company or your organization, that may not be where you put all of your offerings. And Headless, having a different API, maybe you separate it out into multiple offerings. And that really allows you to think about your architecture and your sustainable future in a very different way.
Excellent. I'm going to, before I get into the audience questions, I just want a footnote here. I had mentioned, now that we're in the WordPress 6 era, I had mentioned to my son that there was a time where we would be designing websites not only for the desktop, but separately for the mobile device. And he's 14 and his mind was blown. And then I mentioned cross-browser interoperability, and he was just like, what is that? Like, his expectation is all these things happen at once. So really fantastic conversation. We have some great questions. So I'm going to throw these out to the group. Feel free to jump in. The first question we have from the audience: are you finding opportunities, challenges in building out the overall digital experience, i.e. integrations, when working in a headless world? Content and data feel like easy wins. Whoever would like to jump in there, go for it.
So I think, one of the biggest opportunities, I think, is composability. Now you can more easily bring in, data and content from other sources. That is an easy one, obviously. But think about e-commerce. Can you combine commerce data and your content, your website content, into a new experience for your customers? yeah, you can start doing things like that. In fact, we've been working on things like that. We'll be having a blueprint coming out to show you, like, here's how you could combine BigCommerce data with your WordPress data and make a headless site. So things like that's a really cool thing that you can start doing. But then you start saying, okay, well, I'm bringing in data from multiple sources. What other insights can we get? Can we look at content that is performing on our site and look at the Google Analytics and then change the front end based on different things that are happening to the traffic and to make adjustments? You could do something like that. Like, there's all these new things that you can think about when you're working in the headless world, and not to mention the multi-channel opportunities that you didn't necessarily have before. You'd have to like replicate content or things like that if you're working between things. We have folks working in the metaverse, powering it with WordPress, using it in a headless manner. I mean, like, it's super early, but that's really cool. So
what I would add to that is, the person who posed this question, I know we talked a lot about content and data and easy wins. What we have all touched on a little bit, but maybe not focused on, is speed, right? Mm-hmm. And how valuable that is. Every second counts. And when you go headless, as Joshua mentioned, you can utilize the most modern coding structure. You are not beholden to how the CMS is coded. You don't have that weight from that CMS, as a baseline that then you're building on top of. And that's a huge win for any brand, large or small. Seconds of time that allow that site to load so much faster, especially on mobile experiences. That helps not only your users, but it also makes Google happier. And it's a win all around.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I just want to thank all three of you, Jason, Joshua, Isadora, for taking the time in the day-to-day to discuss this, to get deep into it. I can't believe almost an hour has gone by. We've been talking about this. Thank you so much to, of course, our partners at WP Engine and everybody that tuned in today. Really, really appreciate it. If you want to dive into the series, all of our other Crafted Future events are up at webbyawards.com. The deadline for the Webby Awards is February 10th. And that's a wrap. So thank you all so much for taking part in this. And I want everybody to have a great day today. Thanks again.
Thank you all.